Hello everyone, Pulse here, and welcome back to another episode of Forging Fantasy, EverQuest Next. Now today we're going to be talking a little bit about somewhat of a hot topic in the MMO genre lately, and that is this idea of horizontal progression. And then at the end of the video I'll add on my answer to the newest roundtable question as well. I decided in the last EverQuest video that I was going to start adding on an answer to a roundtable question as well. So let's just dive right in with the main topic of the video, horizontal progression. So what is it, and really how does it differ from what is the traditional vertical progression system found in most MMOs? Well, in order to answer that, let me explain what the vertical progression system is. Vertical progression is the gear ladder and the infinite loop that you find in MMOs in the endgame, usually tied to raid style content, where you pretty much just race towards the end of the game by reaching their arbitrary max level or their level cap. And then the only way to move beyond this number, this level 50 or level 80, level 100, what have you, to go beyond that point and gain more power, you have to then grind out gear in these like raid settings, and you just do that over and over, fighting the same bosses and go through the same mechanics and same content over and over until the developers can finally catch up to the player base and then put out new content. The problem with this is that once they put in that new content, it essentially nullifies all of the stuff that you've already done. So if you're a player trying to do the newest stuff and you haven't done the previously released stuff, you're doing subpar content then, and it's very hard to do it because you can just blaze right through it. Your gear is already above it, and then at the same time, the gear that you worked so hard to gain to like, give yourself this sense of power, this sense of accomplishment, is also diminished pretty much instantly because the gear that is then provided in the newest content is much stronger than what you have. So when they release this new content, you're essentially put back down to a neutral state where you have to restart this gear grind. You have to position yourself on the gear treadmill and then start it right back up and get back on it. And this idea of kind of this never-ending pursuit towards a new sense of power is called power creeping, and it's been an issue in MMOs for a long time, really, pretty much since their inception. So then what is horizontal progression, and how is it going to really fix these things, or just deviate and go in a different direction completely? Well, horizontal progression is, in essence, a style of progression where instead of going towards this level cap and trying to get gear and get this false sense of accomplishment through achieving gear and stat points, it's more about the journey itself and having a kind of slew of content at all levels and all points within your game experience, instead of making people monotonously level to a certain level cap just to start the quote-unquote real game, which in most MMOs consists of this gear treadmill in a raid setting, and you just endlessly turning, not really providing any true sense of accomplishment. And that is what the horizontal progression is trying to do. The thing is, this raises some questions, obviously. One being, how will they keep players interested once they've explored and gathered all of the classes and they've crafted really all they care to, and to just all of those typical MMO things, all of the things that add to what would be considered the journey. And then beyond that is, how will EverQuest Next provide challenging experiences for the hardcore players, the ones that really enjoy pushing themselves through the hard content, which is usually found where the gear treadmill lies. In addition, how will they provide that sense of progression throughout the game, where the main goals are really to just explore, adventure, and gather? And these are all concerns that come about when you talk about a horizontal progression system. And here's a quote from an EQHammer.com article I've seen that kind of explained what the horizontal progression system will be like in EverQuest Next. Now the quote goes like this: "You might ask how you'll feel any sense of progress in a game where the goal seems to be wandering around and gathering stuff, and that's a fair question. Honestly, we have yet to see how it'll all play out in EverQuest Next. In a world made truly dynamic by things destructible building and terrain, AI that adapts and changes as a result of its own likes, dislikes, and motives. There's multi-classing, where you can collect up classes like Pokemon almost and building a deck and a team. You're building and creating, and the potential for a complex economy is there. And well, you can kind of see as I go along that you might never find yourself bored or at the top of the ladder that doesn't go anywhere. And I kind of like that bit that I read because it really explains what they're trying to do, but they're very admitting to the fact that they're not 100% like in the clear on how to combat the issues that come with kind of diverting away from the vertical progression system. They haven't really got it all nailed down yet, and I think that's fine because this game is still in heavy development. They're pretty early on the MMO version of EverQuest Next, and in addition to that, the fact that they are just very transparent and clear about the fact that they don't know exactly how to combat this, they're more than likely going to look to the players and the feedback that they get through any testing they have on any like closed alpha and beta tests. But more importantly is the roundtable. I mean, they could just easily throw out these ideas to us on their website and just get a clear picture as to what the players think, and then they can implement that, and then they can easily turn the findings they get from what we think we want and tell us how it's turning out. They can show us, and then they can just tweak from there. And I think that's a really good way to combat this, because as of right now, there's just not been a lot of horizontal progression, and in my eyes, it hasn't been perfectly done. In addition to that, though, I kind of want to add a bit of discussion about the endgame, since it's kind of affected by this horizontal progression thing that they're going for in EverQuest Next. So Endgame, SOE has just come out and confirmed that we're not going to get it in the traditional sense, really just to really nail it down that they're trying to stay away from the vertical progression system, and they're staying away from the traditional kind of content where you just get to the end and that's the real game. And this idea of horizontal progression being the way that EverQuest Next is handled has it to being compared to Guild Wars 2, and that's usually coupled with kind of like, I love Guild Wars 2, and then there's a bit of concern, usually about lack of content, which is what the endgame is all about. Now, I've personally expressed my feelings quite a bit on the channel already, how I think Guild Wars 2 is honestly one of the best and one of the top tier MMOs, and something that developers definitely should look at for inspiration. But it just, I don't know, it doesn't hold me due to this lack of engaging in difficult in-game or group play. And at first, the fact that EverQuest Next and Guild Wars 2 are going to be similar on this front had me a little bit worried. Mainly because it just, as I said, it doesn't hold me, and that's fine. Guild Wars 2 fills its niche perfectly fine. But for me, I want to have both experiences. I love Guild Wars 2, and I play it on and off now and then, and that's really what they're going for with their patching style. But I'd like to get an MMO experience that can hold me. And I think that EverQuest Next has a couple things over Guild Wars 2 that we just simply can't ignore when we're talking about the endgame and the horizontal progression system. First off, and the one I think is probably the most important, is this ever-changing and dynamically altered world that we're going to be playing in. The way that the world can really generate itself alongside SOE's ability to fairly easily and quickly trigger events and dynamic happenings in the world, which they've labeled rallying cries, makes this world itself a lot more interesting on the baseline, and makes it a lot more engaging than the static world of a typical MMO, even more than like Guild Wars 2, which is just littered with dynamic events happening regularly to keep you on your toes. The second thing I feel like they have over Guild Wars 2 is Landmark and its implications on the MMO version of EverQuest Next. Now, we don't really know how extensive and how quickly SOE can really dig into the pool of player-created content found in Landmark, and then just from there, like, copy-paste and plop it into the MMO setting. But the fact is that they do indeed have this huge pool of player-made stuff they can utilize when they see fit, and then they can put it down in their game. But that content is essentially coming to them free. They don't have to put any time into it, and if they do, it's going to be minor, because most of the work is going to be done by the players. So then they're going to have the player-made content that they can put in, maybe minor updates and keep people interested in that stuff, but then they'll also have their in-house created content. So the fact that there is that extra layer of content being produced without them actually having to putting too much time into it is a real boon to the game as a whole. Now, finally, the third point is that SOE has kind of promised this AI, which can adapt much like the environment does, and this is going to provide encounters that make it so as the world changes and as the enemies are generated in different ways, the enemy types, even if they're going to be similar, the encounters with them will not be the same, which really allows for a more random feel and an overall more engaging experience. And this is one of the bigger points to me, because Guild Wars 2 had its potential hardcore endgame kind of content with the world bosses that they've spread across the globe that kind of come in at semi-random timers and that sort of thing. However, they always act the same when you fight them, and there's always just a ton of people there, and the real strategy, well, there isn't one. You just Zerg. Zerg is the strategy of choice in Guild Wars 2, and these encounters just, they go by so quick, a few minutes tops, like some of them 2 minutes if you're very quick and you've got a lot of people in like their crafted or in-game gear kind of stuff. They just go by so quick. There's no real accomplishment there. And I think this is one of the reasons that Guild Wars 2 just suffers in the hard content category. It's not that they don't really have something in place for the hardcore, it's just that they didn't really implement it correctly at all, I must say. So SOE's dynamically generated dungeons and world bosses could easily do the same thing that Guild Wars 2 does, where they provide the hardcore experiences by having it more littered about the world instead of instance off in raid style content where gear is the real objective. And they can make it truly challenging if they stick to this promise about the AI adapting. In fact, I would have to say that if you're going to pick between do you want it dumbed down a little bit or really tough, I would say make it excruciatingly tough to the point that it actually has some prestige comes when you kill it. That there's some actual incentive beyond just I want that piece of loot. The incentive could be I'm a badass and I took down this huge monster that doesn't spawn very often, and me and my buddies, we failed a lot trying to kill it, but we finally did it, and now I just feel like a monstrous badass. Even if you have to have something tangible there for people to feel accomplished, give them a title or a seal. People will go after that stuff. And I think that's what they really need to do. They should really stick to making it tough, because in all honesty, as time goes by, it's much easier to nerf something that's become old and outdated in terms of how long it's been in the world. It's much easier to do that than it is to buff something up later after it's too late and too many people have already accomplished their goal in killing it. So I really think they need to go in at like an excruciatingly tough level of difficulty and then tweak it down from there after a specific amount of time, like months and months of it. So as of right now, I honestly think that SOE, if they can deliver on these promises they've kind of given us about the smart and adapting AI alongside the frequent and they've said often jarring changes to the landscape and enemies and in the way they react in the world, I think they are actually on a good course to finally crack this nut that is the horizontal progression system. It should be mentioned, I don't think it really hurts them that much that they have Landmark there as a way to just essentially give them free created content that they can use at their leisure. That alone is a huge boon to EverQuest Next, and I think it is really just going to help them provide new content frequently enough to keep players engaged. But we will see how all of that comes together in the final package and as we move through development. So that's it for the main discussion. So let's end with a roundtable question, as I said. So the question they have posted most recent is, what is your favorite small race? Now, I looked through this and they have gnomes, froglocks, halflings, rotungas, fae, arasai. Now, I must admit, I am not familiar in the slightest with the EverQuest lore in the world. I know that you play in a place called Norath. I know that there's tons of different enemy types, not anime types. There's tons of enemy types, and I just really don't even know what half of these are. But if I had to take a guess, gnomes are typical, froglocks are frog people, halflings are hobbits, the rotungas, I believe, are rat race, and then fae means fairy to me. I'm going to pick the fae, mainly because I just am not a fan of the others. My second choice would have been the frog people, but that's just kind of because I'm kind of in love with the frog from Chrono Trigger, and I kind of imagine any frog people have to be as badass as him. But even still, I'll pick fae over those guys. The top picked one right now is gnomes, maybe just because there's some, I don't know, sadistic love for gnomes. It's hard for me to get past World of Warcraft gnomes, in all honesty, so that's probably why I hate them so much. But yeah, I'll pick Faye today. Not really an important question, but I think that's okay, mainly because we've been rambling on for quite some time already. But yeah, that'll do it for that question. And in all honesty, that'll do it for me as a whole. So let me know in the comments below what you guys think of SOE's take on the horizontal progression system with EverQuest Next, and really how you think that the way they presented themselves. Do you think that's a good way to go about developing the horizontal progression system? And what do you guys think they could implement to really give a just sort of the same incentive that you would normally get in a vertical progression system in terms of like hardcore content or raid bosses, or what can they give to incentivize that isn't the same as gear? And in addition to that, you have to answer the most important question of all, which is, what is your favorite tiny race in EverQuest universe? Gotta let me know. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and hopefully you found this enjoyable and informative, at least a little bit. And if you liked listening to my rambling, I would very much appreciate a thumbs up, a subscribe, a comment down below on really anything discussed today or anything EverQuest Next or gaming related in general. Thanks again for watching, guys. This has been Pulse, and I will see you on the next one. See ya.